Welcome everyone to the first Radiology Chicks and ACR Young Physician Section Book Club. This is Agnes, one of the founder of Radiology Chicks, and Taj is online. She is my, vice president. Welcome everyone. Essentially, if at any point you guys want to talk, you have to click a button that says raise your hand and we will unmute you to talk. Okay? Taj?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Taj. I'm a radiologist in Colorado, and Agnieszka and I are social media best friends. We met through social media when she started the Radiology Chicks and Women in Radiology pages on Facebook, Twitter, etc. And we finally met at the most recent ACR meeting back in May. And thanks to the ACR Young and Early Career Physician section, we were able to bring our idea for this book club to fruition. So what you guys hopefully see on your screens is a slide here that will be up during the entire hour. On the left-hand side, you can see the 12 habits from the book, How Women Rise. And on the right-hand side, all our social media pages, accounts, and the 2 specific hashtags that if you're tweeting during this hour that we'd love for you guys to use so that we can retweet anything awesome you guys have to say. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. We have a bunch of discussion questions, and like Agnieszka said, you can either raise your hand and we can unmute you to ask a question, or you can type in the chat option of this webinar any questions that you might have. So the first question that we're going to start with this book is, in chapter 2, the attorney named Maureen realized that the common female strategy of working as hard as possible and trusting that her hard work will get her noticed is the key reason women in her firm usually make partner later in their careers in comparison to men. So our question for everybody online is, have you seen instances of women losing out because they assumed that their hard work would be noticed and rewarded? And how might we, either as men or women on this conference call, how can we help shift this dynamic for females in our practice? So if anyone wants to chime in, feel free. But I guess I'll go ahead and start by answering this question. And so maybe this will give some of you guys some ideas to that of your experiences in your workplace. So as far as how I've seen women lose out because they assume their hard work will be rewarded, I think that's just a common habit. And that's habit number 2, as you guys can see on your slide. I think a lot of us work really hard, and we're hopeful that that alone will get rewarded. But how can we help shift this dynamic? Well, one is to claim our achievements, which is habit number 1, that a lot of women in particular, we forget to celebrate ourselves. And so that's an important thing to do. But also what we can do for each other is what you've seen me and Agnieszka do online, is anytime we see a really cool article either written by a female radiologist or about a female radiologist, or they're included, in particular a lot of those ACR bulletin articles, our newsletters, journals, etc. We try to celebrate these women by tagging them in posts either on Facebook or tagging them on posts in Twitter. So that's definitely one way that we can help shift this dynamic. Is, one of the hashtags we wanted to push for this webinar was he for she, but this is a way that she for she can really help each other if we uplift each other. So Agnieszka, I don't know if you have any thoughts, and again, we're looking out for chat questions or people to raise their hands, so please feel free to participate.
Yeah, I think this is very common, and I think that this took me many years in my career to realize. I mean, I graduated med school in 2004, and I did have some sponsors along the way that did notice some of my skills and things that I was good at as far as leadership and things like that. Um, but really, if you don't, even yourself, don't point out some of the things that you're good at sometimes, and to me, it feels like bragging, and I'm not comfortable with that. And it took a long time for me to not be shy about maybe tweeting about something that Taj and I are doing, or kind of bringing attention to some of our efforts. Um, but I learned that it's okay. Um, you mean not to the point of ad nauseum, where every tweet is how great we are, um, but I think it's okay, and because otherwise it's really hard to get noticed. Nobody will notice you if you don't do that. And I think it's also good to do it for others, like Taj mentioned, whether on social media or in real life, or nominating people in organizations or for awards and things like that. And a lot of these things are very active, much more active than what we're used to doing as women, which is, just expecting that people will realize how wonderful you are. Only my husband does that. Leaves me little notes once in a while.
Well, you have a wonderful husband. That's awesome, and that's for sure. Is there anyone who's on the webinar who'd
Katie.
like to take a...
I see Katie's hand raised. Let me see if I can figure this out. Unmute Katie. All right, Katie, you're on.
Okay, I think that it's working. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sounds great.
Okay. I'm sitting in my basement right now, so if you hear kids, that's why. But I was just wondering, so I'm a staff radiologist at University of Iowa, so I work with a lot of residents, and of course there's a lesser women residents than there are male, but I was just wondering if either of you had thoughts on how to kind of push this forward in the next generation, how to encourage the residents who are under me and learning from me, how to encourage them to do this, to become noticed and rewarded for their contributions.
Sure. So
sorry. I just want to clarify your question. Are you asking how you as an attending can help other women, or are you asking what advice would you give to younger women to have their work noticed and be rewarded?
Yeah, so I'm asking for what advice I should give to them, because of course I will, try to promote them to the best of my ability, speak out against their bring forward their accomplishments and things like that. But what advice could I give them to help them realize that this would be helpful for them?
So I have a unique so this is Agnes, and I have a unique experience in that I did multiple residency programs, kind of spread out by years of work. So I became an internist, then I worked for a couple of years. I did nuclear medicine, worked for a couple of years, radiology, and then I went straight through IR, and now I'm working again. And so what I would say that the kind of the climate of teaching and the climate of ACG, I mean just medical education, is changing slowly. When I first started, my first residency, it was more like, oh, well, it was painful for us, and therefore it's going to be painful for you, and we will not help you. You will have to earn every single accolade. And I think that's changing, and we're trying to raise women more and not have them quit, more challenging specialties or things, or trying to encourage them into specialties that previously, they were not encouraged to go into, like radiology, for example, or surgery, orthopedics, neurosurgery, things like that. And I think the best way is to lead by example. I think that, obviously, and also if you see your co-attendings discourage people, to kind of kibosh that if you can. It's leading by example, because the hardest thing that happens, I think, it was just really hard. I do have some experiences where I was discouraged and sabotaged by female attendings when I was a resident, and I think that those memories are what led me to even start the Radiology Chicks group and kind of this whole thing that Taj and I are doing, if that makes any sense. And I'm not sure if that answer was helpful. It does, or yes. Not.
It was helpful. Thank you.
I would also encourage people to, I know I'm the social media liaison, so I'm almost always going to answer with the social media answer, but encourage them to get online and celebrate themselves on their various accounts, because there's something comforting in a weird way about hiding behind the computer. And I see it all the time. At least I used to be very heavily involved in the AMA, and I'm still friends with all of those people from the resident and fellow section, and they celebrate themselves, like whatever resolution they got passed or accomplishments that they've achieved with the AMA. That might be kind of a stepping stone, but I do agree with Agnieszka that leading by example is absolutely a wonderful way, and to keep encouraging them, especially when you get that one-on-one time in the reading room. Katie, if you have, say, me as a resident, you can just be like, Taj, I've noticed that you're doing a really great job here, so speak up about it, answer those questions in the morning conference because I know you know the answer. That little bit of encouragement, like someone believing in me, it could go a long way, and, encourage women to speak up and raise their voices, for sure.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm still trying to learn how to use this program, but I don't see any other hands raised. Do you?
I don't. I think maybe you can go on with your next planned question. Taj planned all these questions, guys, by the way. I was on call.
Well, thank you for that. So question number 2 is about habit number 4, which is building only instead of building and leveraging relationships. So does the idea of leveraging relationships rather than just building them make you feel uneasy? And do you believe doing this would make you a shallow person or a user? If so, did reading the chapter about this habit give you a new perspective? And what might leveraging look like for you? So I can go ahead and try to give an answer to this question. So I love building relationships. I feel I'm very social and outgoing, and I love meeting new people, etc. But building relationships only, I too have noticed, is it's not good enough. Part of building these relationships is to be able to, I don't want to say leverage them and use the person I've met, but that hopefully our friendship is mutual. And if I, for example, ask Agnieszka, hey, I don't feel comfortable tweeting that I won some award, could you do it for me? That she would do that for me, and I would do it vice versa. And that's just one example of a very simple example, I feel, of leveraging a relationship, is just asking someone to do something as simple as that, which takes very little effort and doesn't take too much time or cost anything. But that's, I don't feel like it makes me a shallow person or a user. I feel like it's asking my friend with whom I have a great relationship to help me out. And when the time comes that she needs it in return, I'd absolutely do that for her. And I think that's one of the things that chapter really discussed, is leveraging a relationship is mutually beneficial. So
I agree. I agree with Taj wholeheartedly there. And I also wanted to bring up one more point before we let Kim talk here in just one second. And the point is that, that part and kind of, having your friends help you is one thing. But what I think men are more comfortable with and women are not is choosing your friends based on whether or not they may be able to help you at some point. And I have to say that personally, I don't think I'm quite as social as Taj. I have a hard time, remembering names and doing things like that. But I would have a really hard time to choose my friends based on whether or not I think that they can help me in the future in my career or whatever. But yet, you will become sort of the kind of person that your 10 closest people in your circle are like. That didn't sound right, but the circle around you is kind of the person that you will become. They've shown this in studies, I guess. And so you want to surround yourself by people that sort of reflect your values and maybe in your job circle, kind of more of what you want to become and less of what you were. I don't know if that makes any sense. Does that make sense, Taj?
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
I mean, it's a nicer way of saying choose your friends or your future friends by whether that person will help you. Because, like, we know as parents, and we all have kids in the background, I think, almost people in this group, our time is very limited. And I thank all of you for participating, in this chat. And Kim had raised her hand first, so I'm going to unmute her first here, if I can unmute. All right, Kim?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Kim.
Okay, this is Kimberly Beavers. I just wanted to echo a couple of the things that you just said, especially about the symbiotic nature of relationships and how that's a good thing. I think that men are a lot less shy about that, and that another thing, in addition to the relationship being mutually symbiotic, it's also a way for you to kind of shape who you want to be. And at least for me personally, through the ACR and through these organizations, I've been able to look at women who inspire me, and those are the types of women that I want to reach out and be friends with, because they're going to help me shape myself and develop myself into a better person. And I think that there couldn't be anything really selfish about that. I know we all are really shy about, like, wanting to reach out, wanting to ask for things, but we're all developing towards a greater goal, I think, as women in radiology. So if we're accomplishing that, then the benefit is for everyone. But I know that it's kind of scary at first.
That was a very eloquent way of saying what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Great job. I love that, Kim. Thank you.
And Amanda Klepp, we're trying to unmute you here. Amanda? Maybe she changed her mind. Does anybody else have a comment? Melissa, let's see. Give me 1 second. Oh, Melissa Chen?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
I apologize again. This is Melissa Chen. I'm from Houston, and I apologize again if you hear some screaming kids in the background. But I wanted to echo and kind of, I totally agree with what you're saying, Agnes, about trying to surround yourself with people who you look up to. And I think this is something that I realized later on in life. I had a friend in medical school who dragged me into she said, oh, let's join this committee. It'll be a lot of fun. And she was the type of person who wanted to be the president of organizations and things like that. And it wasn't something that ever occurred to me to do in my spare time, is to join committees, but she dragged me onto it. And that sort of led me to doing more activities within organized medicine. But I think I think it was Warren Buffett that said that you should really try to make friends with people who are smarter than you. And I really feel like that's something that I've been able to do more recently, especially similar to what Kimberly said in making friends within the ACR and other organizations, is I really feel like the colleagues that I work with and have had the opportunity to work with in these organizations really are better than me, and they make me better people. And so being able to leverage those relationships that I have with those people have been really beneficial for me.
Great
That's
comment.
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? I'm scrolling up and down. I don't see any hands.
I know I have Richard.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Richard Strax, you're on.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me
Welcome.
okay?
Yep,
Hello?
welcome.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for joining.
Well, thank you. I would second what Melissa said in terms of what Warren Buffett said about making relationships with people smarter than you. But one thing you can do is make relationships with people, as she said, that are more involved. And there's nothing phony about that. Being friends with people that are more involved, oftentimes those people want to bring other people along, want to mentor people. And those kinds of relationships are very helpful in getting you more involved and more noticed in a leadership way. So I think that's also a very good thing.
I agree.
Agreed.
When I chose Taj to be the kind of the co-admin, I had absolutely no idea that she was so connected. I promise you. I mean, that's the truth. I lucked out. And she's helped me out a lot.
Well, thank you. That's a wonderful compliment. Anyone else want to talk about question number 2, leveraging relationships?
I think we're exhausted there.
Would you say, Ed?
Oh, let's move on. We can move on to 3.
Righty. So then the next question I have, and this one's a little bit loaded because there's a lot to think about. You can see again on your screen the 12 habits. So which habits or behaviors described in the book do you believe apply to you? And how did reading about them maybe strengthen your awareness of how they affect you? So Agnes, do you want to tackle that one first? And then I'll either answer or we can let people participate.
Sure. So there were actually quite a few that applied to me, which is why I found this book to be quite helpful. I think that for me, ruminating is big, and it's less to do with my leadership strategies as for kind of if I have an adverse patient outcome or something doesn't quite come out. And I certainly read about it. I talk with my colleagues about it. But for some reason, I have a really hard time letting it go. And I kind of let it affect me for about a week or two after, the incident. And, I've never had any really bad outcomes, but I find that it's very distracting from, for moving on. And I think I tend to do the same thing in work relationships where I have, if you can't please everybody at work, right? And the disease to please, I also have that, the disease to please. I really try to please everybody, but sometimes you just have to draw that line and say to yourself, I cannot make everybody happy when I am in charge of the schedule, or when I decide which patients we're bringing down today. Somebody's going to be unhappy, whether it's the ultrasound tech or it's this person, and you just have to just let it go and not think about it anymore. And with the patients, I still have a hard time, but with these work decisions, it's much easier for me. And I've kind of tried to train myself to just let it go and not, I know as soon as it happens, I'm done thinking about it. The people who are going to be unhappy, they're going to be unhappy no matter what I do. There's always going to be somebody unhappy about something. And so you just have to make the decision that's best for everybody. And most importantly, the patient or whatever, but just can't make everybody happy.
All righty. I am trying to make sure that I can that we include people's comments that they put in the chat. So one asker had put in here, I haven't gotten through the entire book yet, but I just finished habit 3, and all of the first 3 apply to me. So far the book has been very enlightening. So thank you to that user who participated via chat. And you can let me know if you'd like me to identify you, but for the most part, I'll keep everyone who poses questions anonymous unless you'd like me to identify you. I'll go ahead and answer this question as well. I think I find that I'm sure all of these 12 habits to some extent apply to me, but my biggest one is ruminating. I definitely spend a lot of time, anticipating how discussions might go, and then once they've happened, I go over them and over again in my head. And what I have to do with this habit is learn to let it go and, recognize that the past is in the past. So whatever happened during that conversation or during a case or a biopsy, whatever, what's done is done. Learn from it and move forward. So that for sure is one of mine. And I think one of, the steps that I've taken to doing, to tackling that is if I find myself thinking over and over again, I try to distract by either playing with my dog, my son, watching television, something like that. And then I had something else to say, but I can't remember. certainly that seems to be the habit that affects me the most.
Does anybody else have a comment? Because I can talk about all of these habits. And I don't do this as much because nobody's raising their hand right now. I'll just say one more thing, I guess. I still don't know. I'm not as good at, this enlisting allies thing, and that has to do with networking. And something we already kind of brought up earlier. Obviously Taj is my ally, but at my actual job, in the hospital I work at, it's hard for me when you get to a new place and you don't know anyone, and who do I want to be my friend, or I really don't pick my friends based on who I think is going to help me, and maybe I should, I don't know, but I have a really hard time enlisting allies and asking for help. I'm trying to be better at it, but I see somebody has raised their hand, so we're going to let Olga talk here. I'm muting. Olga, go ahead. Welcome.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
So this is sort of a comment and a question. It's interesting that we're doing this book club. The timing is actually great because I am currently sort of in the point in my group where I'm going to be coming up for partnership soon. And very recently I had like a review kind of meeting with the head of our group and one other person. And at the end of the meeting, which was extremely brief, in the middle of a Saturday call day, so literally lasting about 120 seconds, the head of our group asked me, so do you have any questions? And so I said, well, I'd like to know how I'm doing in terms of partnership track. I want to be partner, and I want to make sure I'm on track for that. And he kind of just looked at me and goes, oh, you're interested in that? And I was floored. I thought to myself, how could he think I wouldn't be interested? And the chapter about the lawyer who kept getting bypassed for promotion to partner came to mind completely. Yeah. They just don't expect a woman, perhaps, because there aren't any female partners in our group. It's all male. They didn't expect a woman to want to be partner, perhaps, or I don't know what it is. But I was very surprised. So I was very glad that I had brought it up because I think actually my question had taken him by surprise. So very, very, very relevant just in navigating our careers in a very male-dominated field.
Absolutely. Well, congrats to you for standing up for yourself and making people aware of what your goals are, because that is kind of part of number 2, is expecting other people to notice and be rewarded. You're absolutely right. No one's gonna make assumptions. You have to say what you want. So kudos to you and good luck
congratulations.
With that. Yeah, I really do. Congratulations on that.
Well, hopefully it will work. I'll keep you all posted.
Definitely do. We're interested.
And we will celebrate you on Rad Chicks, that's for sure. So someone in the question section wrote, ruminating is a really difficult habit to break, and I hope there will be follow-up book/discussion with suggestions on how to break some of these habits. So actually, we can kind of skip around. That wasn't going to be my next question, but I'll go ahead and ask that because I think it's a good segue. So How Women Rise, the book, suggested a process of letting go of your habits, and they had a 4-step process. The first step is choose one behavior, so kind of start small, and even you can go smaller and choose one part of a particular behavior rather than trying to change whole things at once. The second step is enlisting allies in your effort to address the behaviors. The third step is to let go of judgment. And the fourth and final is to remember what got you here. So I know that was a lot of processes how to break this habit, but that actually kind of reminds me of the part that I forgot when I was talking about ruminating. One of the things that I have started doing, and I don't know if it's the best idea, but it has been helping me a little bit, is when I know I'm going into a challenging conversation, I will actually record the conversation on my phone. And when I get home later that evening, I'll listen back to it, and I'll listen to my tone of voice, the words that I said. Did I use or too much? Did I, put myself down in any way? Things like that. And that has really helped me not stop ruminating per se, because, it's a habit, so they're hard to break, but it has decreased, for sure, me ruminating, because I find that habit is because I'm not ever quite sure what I said or how I said it. And so by recording these conversations and listening back, I have that recording to hear how I sound and to hear the words that I use. And that has allowed me to to be quicker about letting things go and saying, okay, well, that's what I said. That's how I said it. Now time to move on. So that's been one of my ways. And, I definitely also enlist allies. I have definitely a few strong friendships who I feel confident that they'll keep any concerns I have confidential, and I really trust these people. And so I feel very comfortable running some situations by them and getting their feedback. And I want them to be honest with me, like, hey, what do you think of this email that I'm about to send my boss? And, one of my friend will write back, she's like, that's way too harsh. At least that's the way I read it. Maybe word it a little bit differently. Or, you're putting yourself down and you're apologizing too much. Here's how I would write it. And so enlisting people has definitely been super helpful in helping me break some habits.
Yep, I agree. And I started, after reading this book, I did decide to work on some of these things. And for me, it was the too much section that I started with, actually. Because for those people that know me here, I think I saw Anna Havey here listening, who know me in person for a couple of years there. She knows I can get very passionate, and I mean there are times when I can lose my temper, and that's not really a professional thing to do. And so that's something that I've chosen to work on, as well as, in addition to losing my temper, right afterwards talking about it really fast to whoever is willing to listen. This just has to stop. And so I just try to catch myself. And I have also enlisted a few allies, one or two people I trust at work, like Taj, who I'm like, look, if I do this, kick me, touch me on the shoulder, do something so that I know, hard stop, I need to stop this. And it does work. Even just the realization that this is the habit I'm working on, I need to stop this. This is not a professional thing to be doing. It really helps, and it works. I think I'm better. Anna's like, yep, 2 years too late, but I really think I'm working on it. So just, well, I see Olga's hand is raised again, and I'm not sure if she wants to talk again. So we'll unmute you just in case. Olga, you're unmuted.
Oh, that was by mistake. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
But Olga, you did ask a question that I will respond to. There was a question, do you request permission to record the conversation, or is it strictly for personal use? It is strictly for personal use. I am not recording these conversations to one day be used in a court of law. And besides, there are many states that have two-recorder laws anyway. So sometimes that's something that I probably should work on and feel brave enough to ask people, is it okay if I record this? But for now, it really is for me to listen to myself and learn if I did an okay job, and to try and break the habit of ruminating. And then let's see. Someone wrote here, my microphone is not working, so I'm writing a question To follow up on Dr. Solberg's statement earlier, and I quickly want to add that allies are important and friends are important, but they don't necessarily have to be the same people. Someone can be an ally without being a quote-unquote friend. An ally relationship can simply be transactional and nothing more. So that's a great comment from Dr. Patel. Thank you. It's great to see another man conversation.
And
so thank
yeah,
you.
thank you for joining us. And I think that maybe that's a little more difficult for women and something that we do need to work on. You know, for me, it would be hard just to have an ally and not have. I mean, obviously, it's a colleague. I guess I have had some, you know, Taj. I have had some sponsors in the past that were men, obviously, because men are, you know, more common who, you know, in leadership positions. For example, a neurologist who has actually passed away a couple years ago. But and when I was working with him, I was an internal medicine resident, and he really helped me out as far as mentorship and leadership and things like that. But we were never buddies, right? I mean, we never went out for a drink or hung out until, you know, years and years later after I left, when, you know, he was diagnosed with, you know, a terminal disease. And then I would fly to Washington once a year just to, you know, have a little lunch with him and thank him for all those things. But yes, I think for me, it's hard to have that kind of a relationship.
Right.
Not impossible.
And Dr. wrote here, but remember, allies may be looking for people to mentor.
That's true. That's a very good point.
Yeah. All righty. So then I don't see any more questions. And Ag, do you see any other hands raised?
I don't see any hands. I'm keeping an eye on the hands. If you're keeping an eye on the questions, we got a good split here. I don't even know where the questions are.
Perfect, because I can't see hands raised. So let's move on to the next question, which I think I'm hoping to hear from some of the men involved in our conversation for sure. It's, do you think that some of the behaviors described in this book also apply to men? And if so, which ones? And maybe in what circumstances? And do you feel that any of the men who exhibit any of these behaviors, does it hold men back? So,
wait, Richard.
Go ahead.
Let me unmute. Richard Strauss, Dr. Strauss?
Sure. So, you know, the book points out that all people aren't the same, and there are certainly overlaps. These are habits that perhaps more women have that hold them back, but certainly there are men that have these same habits. So I look at these habits and I look at the disease to please, which is one of these things: failure to draw boundaries, the tendency to overextend oneself, to always say yes. You run into a lot of people who say, you know, I always say yes when someone asks me to do something. That's something that, you know, certainly I recognize in myself and in other men as well. It's something you just want to do all that you can do, and you don't want to say no to things. And sometimes you just need to really recognize that and say no to some things as you go along. And yes, that is something that holds you back, because if you're overextended, if you're obligated in too many ways, yeah, you can't do a great job or give all your time to everything.
Dr. Strauss, do you feel like that behavior of the disease to please held you back in any way, or has held you back in any ways?
No, it probably has. You know, I enjoy doing things and I enjoy being involved, and you know, there's a certain ego satisfaction in being involved in doing things. There's a certain sense that you're interested and you want to do many things, but you know, it can help you and it can hold you back at the same time. So yeah, I think sometimes it can hold you back. You know, has it held me back? Yeah, in some ways it probably probably does. I see that tendency in other people probably because I see it in myself.
Gotcha. So Denise had written a comment. Her microphone's not working. It actually goes back to the last question, so I'll just make sure. And that last question was about breaking habits. So Denise wrote, one thing that is helping me let go of ruminating is realizing the positive root of these habits, as mentioned in the book, which is being deeply thoughtful. So people who tend to ruminate tend to be deeply thoughtful, and focusing on the positive aspects of my personality that leads me to this habit gives me a degree of freedom to let it go. So thank you, Denise, for that comment. That is incredibly insightful. I'm going to have to tweet that at the end of this. But back to our question number 5. Is there anyone else who wants to discuss how some of these behaviors may apply to men, which ones, and if they maybe in any way hold men back?
I see Carolyn Ling with her hand raised. Caroline, I'm sorry, Dr. Ling.
Hi, yeah, Caroline's fine. Yeah, I just feel as physicians, rather than just men and women physicians perhaps, I think as a group we tend to be ruminators, we tend to be perfectionists, we tend to be thoughtful people, and so maybe as a group compared to other business people and people in other careers, I think it's something that a lot of us have a problem with. A lot of us have a problem letting go because we're used to, succeeding in life and doing things well and making everything perfect. So I definitely see that as something that would hold both men and women back and would be common among us as a group.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else on the topic of these behaviors and applying to men? I don't see any more comments. Agnieszka, do you see any hands raised?
No, Dr. Strax is still raised, but I'm not sure if...
All right.
Nope.
Okay, so then we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. So for everyone to think about what experiences in your life, or maybe in the course of your career or getting to the point of achieving this career, may have shaped these habits or behaviors that most likely hold you back. Again, this is kind of another one of those loaded questions, but I do remember in the book that it discussed how often men are almost praised for being aggressive and loud and things like that, because you see it in kids when they play sports like football, like, one of the boys who does that great block or whatever. It seems kind of violent, but he's almost praised for being so aggressive and hardcore and things like that. And it kind of boosts their ego and gives them the confidence to maybe not have any of these habits. Whereas women, we tend to be praised for doing really well in school and getting straight A's and coming home. But if we, exert any assertiveness as little kids, sometimes we're told, oh, you're too bossy, or ladies don't do that. And I'm sure there are probably some women on this phone call, or even some of the men who have sisters, that maybe, you have experienced this discouragement, if you will, from being assertive.
I think this is where it starts with how we raise our children. I mean, I think that's the cause of a lot of this. And it's so deeply ingrained in us that it's the hardest thing to break. As parents, I really had to examine how I treat my own children, 2 boys and 1 girl. And I'm starting to look at other people and how they treat theirs, and the differences in, school evaluations and things like that. And I really do think that we need to change how we discipline girls versus boys and how we critique what they're wearing. You know, my husband was the other day, it's like, oh, my son who's 12 was wearing a pink t-shirt, and he's like, oh, pink is not a is a girl color. I said, absolutely not. If he wants to wear a t-shirt that he brought for Breast Awareness Month, he's going to wear it, and you're not going to say anything about it. You know, but he was a farmer. Which is not an excuse anymore. It doesn't matter.
That's true. That is true. I think that kind of goes back to what was raised a few questions ago, is how do we lead by example? And Agnieszka, I feel like you nailed it very well on the head. We need both mothers and fathers to treat our children more equally and, you know, let them know that, yes, sure, there are gender differences, but as far as a lot of behavior goes and interests, that you can do it just as much as a man can, and vice versa, depending whatever the situation is, for sure.
And I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to play soccer, and my mom told me that was not a girl sport. And so when I got to medical school, I said, oh yeah, I'm gonna up one and I'm gonna play rugby. When you know, there was no more control.
How did that go?
But oh no, I mean, I lasted a year. I broke a rib, and that was that. I'm like, this is dumb. I need to do med school. But that's not the point. I mean, you know, the point is that but not all girls will have that reaction, right, to the criticism. Some would may shut down and really believe that they can't do these things. You know, soccer, rugby, snowboarding, whatever, you know, whatever is considered the boy thing to do. Radiology, interventional radiology, orthopedic surgery, the president.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, again, like I said, we need to set some examples. And so I find that if I catch myself thinking something like, oh, I can't believe she said that, I pause and I do a lot of self-reflection. Like, why did I think that was not okay? Would I have felt differently if a man had said that? And that's a question that I pose to myself as well, is I don't know if I should do this or celebrate my achievement, whatever it is, or I don't know if I should say, yeah, I do want to be a partner. Then I pause and think, well, what would a man do? And I quickly realized most of them wouldn't hesitate. So why should I? And then I try and go for it. That's something I definitely try to do for myself.
Does anybody else have any comments? And while I'm waiting for comments, recently on somebody's Facebook post, not on our group, but somewhere else, somebody posted an article saying that any women job advice is considered gaslighting. And I read this article, and I disagreed with a lot of it. I mean, I agreed with some of it, I get it. But I also think that these little changes these don't negate the fact that changes have to be made from, the culture changes have to come, but those take generations. Women will not be equal in 5 years. I mean, that's just a pipe dream. It's going to take longer, but we do have to work at it. If we don't work at it, it's going to take even longer. But truly, things like, gender equality, or gender issues and racism. I mean, these things take literally generations to change, because people are raised certain ways, and it truly is really hard to change these beliefs that people have ingrained in them since birth, if that makes sense. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't fight and we shouldn't make these little changes. And I don't think that these books are gaslighting at all.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I don't see any comments about this question. So anyone raise their hand? Oh, wait, hold on. A comment just showed up. How do women handle professional meetings where men take over the conversation? Ooh.
Ooh, I know.
That's a,
Well, here's what I do. So first off, I no longer let anyone cut me off in a conversation. If someone cuts me off, I say, excuse me, I was speaking. I'll just call them out. I'll say whatever their name is, John or, Gary, or depending on the meeting. And I say, I am sorry, I was speaking. Please let me finish my thought. And I continue to speak. Done. It's kind of embarrassing to the other person a little bit, but you would think it should be embarrassing to me. But after you do this a few times, it comes quite easily.
how did it go the first time for you? Were you a little unnerved after you?
I was very unnerved, and I think I might have dropped my pen, but it really does get easier. Nobody honestly would even bats an eye or thinks poorly of you. I mean, people are like, oh yeah, well, yeah, you cut her off, dude. And whether it's man or woman, it doesn't matter who cuts me off. And if somebody else gets cut off and I'm the leader, if it's, if I'm the committee leader or whatever, and somebody gets cut off, I do the same thing for the other person. Excuse me, Dr. So-and-so was speaking. Could you let her finish her thought?
Oh, that's a great example. She for she, that's for sure. And there's a comment here. Amy says, Agnes, I do the same thing. I call them out on interrupting. Well, good for you, Amy. I think that's really amazing. So I think we all need to try and stand up for ourselves a lot more. I can imagine the very first time is nerve-wracking. And I know I would ruminate too long about what made people thought that. But definitely something to try for sure. So anything else on that?
Does anybody else have any comments about that?
Oh, hold on. There might be one more comment here. Melissa wrote, I have been doing this as well. Also having allies in the room to create the space for more silent voices is more important. And I think that's kind of what you were saying, Agnieszka. If you notice someone else being called out someone else being interrupted, that you call out the interrupter on behalf of the person who is interrupted. So I think that's really great. And Leah, who asked
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go on. I interrupted you.
Oh, yes, you did. So Leah, who asked the question, she said, thank you. That's a great intervention. Now you go ahead. Thank you.
But what that also does, it empowers that other person to stand up for somebody else in the future. It truly does.
I agree. Well, we only have about 7 minutes left, so this is really exciting. But so I will go ahead and ask one last question, and we'll keep the conversation pretty brief because I think this is a challenging question anyways. But can you think of any habits or behaviors that were not mentioned in this book? I know for myself, I really reflected on this question quite a bit, and anything that came to my mind seemed to somehow be either an offshoot of one of the habits or, pretty related to one of them. But, and so, for example, I think I was just thinking about myself in my own job and career is I really look out for others, like my staff and colleagues, et cetera. And while I think that's, admirable, sometimes it's gotten in the way of me advancing for myself. And sometimes it's hindered me and held me back. And I think that relates quite a bit to the disease to please. I'm trying to help so many people. So what I do need to realize for sure is to, I don't want to say be selfish and think about myself, but kind of reflect on, is this my job to take care of this other person? Or is it, the job of our chief of operations? Or is it the job of our boss above me, the chief of the department, something like that. So that certainly, again, taking a step back and trying to figure out, do I need to be involved? So not being too involved. And Melissa, I apologize. You had written a comment probably after I moved on, but you wrote the Obama staffers used to do this, and I think you're talking about women who would uplift other staffers in the meeting by agreeing with what they said or complimenting them and looking out for them. So I think that's wonderful. And Sarah, you just wrote a funny comment. I just keep talking. Maybe that comes off as rude, but if someone tries to cut in, I repeat what I said and keep talking. So good for you. I need to start doing that. And also Dr. Strax wrote, Richard wrote, women need to stand up for women in the meeting also. And then Amy wrote, also important to point out when someone is trying to speak and can't get a word in. It allows someone quieter to have their voice heard. And
Agreed.
Dr. Oliveira wrote, I have not finished the book, so not sure if this is included, but imposter syndrome. That's a good one. I am really affected by this.
I think most of us are.
Yeah.
I also like to just to follow up on one of those things is, like you said with the staffers, is repeating and or thanking people during a meeting for bringing up points, and saying things like, oh, that's a great point, or that's a good point. Not everything has to be great, but and just kind of making people feel good about contributing, because especially for women, I think that encourages them to contribute more next time too.
Absolutely. Well, we only have a couple minutes left, and who is this? Dr. Germain wrote a great comment here that this platform, discussion, book club, daily posts are inspirational, supportive, and super encouraging. Hashtag she for she. We should do part 2, and this way more of us will finish this book. I think that's wonderful. Well, I don't think we'll be able to have another book club next month, but I do encourage people who haven't finished the book to definitely read it, because there's lots of valuable advice. And I think it might have been Kim Beavers who said before, there's a great, at the end of this, remember what got you here, that final chapter and that final piece of advice on how to improve. It really describes why women who exhibit these habits do it, and it's all positive reasons why we have these habits. So I think once you get to the end of the book, you'll find a lot of encouragement there. So with only a minute or 2 to go, Agnes, is there anything else you want to say or add, or if there's anyone else who wants to raise their hand?
Just wanted to thank the ACR for helping us out during this inaugural book club, and I think that quarterly we can do it. I think we can do a book club. If people want to finish this book, we can certainly tweet more about it, or post more about it in our on our Facebook page, the public Facebook page, on Women in Radiology, or you can look it up under Radiology Chicks. I think that the name of this, it's at Radiology Chicks or under Facebook or something like that. But that's we can certainly have more discussions there.
To find it. So, all right, then I'll read these last couple of comments, which I think are pretty great. So I will pay it forward and turn it into a book club with my local female radiologist, Dr. Ring, and I think that's really awesome for you to do that.
Oh, that's amazing.
And Dr. Sepulveda wrote, great discussion. Thank you for organizing. And Richard wrote, this book club is wonderful. I read a book I might not otherwise have read, so please do it again. So just lots of thank yous here, which is awesome. So I'm going to end this conversation by, thanking everyone for participating. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to take a quote from this book, since we are all, or most of us on this phone call, are radiologists. From page 59, functional MRI confirms the brain retains the capacity to build fresh neural pathways at every stage of life. So if you have any doubt about changing your behaviors, you don't need to have any doubt, because radiology has proven that you can build fresh neural pathways and improve your habits.
What a great final quote, Taj.
So relevant, right? And it was in the book.
Totally.
So thank you for participating. Get on Twitter, Facebook.
Thank you for everybody who's been tweeting. I couldn't look on the Twitter too much because then I can't listen to what anybody's saying. So, but
so I did
we'll
quite
review
a bit of
those soon.
tweeting. Yeah, and Catherine, thank you to the ACR, the Young Physicians and Early Career Physician section for helping to make this webinar happen. And Agnieszka and Women in Radiology on Facebook, thank you for coming up with the book to discuss.
Oh, thank you for coming up with the questions.
You're welcome. All righty.
Well, thank you guys. Have a good night.
So have a good night. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.